So you've heard of us mentioning on many episodes that aircraft mechanics here in the US anyway are labeled as unskilled labor. And we've had so many questions about that, ourselves included, about why that is. So we decided today to have this episode to address that and explore a little bit about why that is.
And it's actually, we're going to learn just as much as you're going to learn. We're pulling on an article here, dated back in 2017. But still, it provides some good information. And Six and I were talking before the show. We've learned that being a jack of all trade doesn't help sometimes in the calling yourself skilled, right?
Yes.
Well, how are you skilled on 100 different things? It's kind of what we've learned via this article, but we'll get rolling through it here and you guys will see.
Yes. So this article is again from 2017 and it's written by the Aircraft Mechanics Fraternal Association. So this is like a union for, let's say, it's not a union specific to one place, but I want to say it's kind of like an all-encompassing union specifically for aircraft mechanics technicians and avionics technicians. There's a whole bunch of organizations in this article that are cited with this, and their whole goal of this is to kind of break up the misconception about aircraft mechanics or aircraft maintenance technicians being unskilled. And as we're reading through this, we've learned quite a lot, as what MVP has said, like especially in terms of mechanics or aircraft mechanics are unskilled. And so when we first thought about this, before we looked up evidence for this episode, we were dating this back since the Nixon era, where we're considered unskilled, we're considered not knowing, we're considered like haphazard labor, like we're not smart in the head, right? And there's been many organizations and events and incidents that suggest otherwise, that aircraft mechanics are indeed skilled and are indeed know what the hell they're doing. And how this kind of sort of came about, it started with the Department of Labor and how they used to classify what they would understand as skilled or unskilled occupations. And then according to this article, that classification hasn't been used since the 80s. And that kind of fell into line with what that misconception is, especially during the Nixon era, because a lot of the mechanics that around that time are still in the occupation, right? So their burns, I want to say, there's burns, their scars, their fingers in the face kind of stuck with them throughout. And to kind of pull them out of it, it's kind of hard, especially when they've already embedded that knowledge to other mechanics down the line, which later trickled down to us and then some of the newer mechs and technicians coming up. And with that said, the Department of Labor no longer uses that classification. They use this newer system, say, where they assign certain occupations a certain level of points. They call this the
specific vocational preparation score. Is that what that is?
Yes, that specific vocational preparation score. And what that means is they assign some kind of point system that you need this much prep time to be able to gain the average knowledge to successfully perform a job, right? So like the SVP, is where the technician or the occupation requires that you learn the techniques, acquire the information, and develop the facility needed to perform a job. And this score is rated from 1 to 9. 1 being like requires minimal to no prep time, say like an elevator button pusher. Doesn't take much to push a button, especially one that lights up when you press it. And then up to 9, where it's like it requires the most amount of time, somewhere around the realm of 10 years. Think like, say, a brain surgeon, in order for him to
some sort of neurosurgeon or whatever.
Yeah, like someone where like it takes you a long time to fully understand how to do your job on the average, not doing great, just on the average. And then the scale from 1 to 9 is further broken down into other groups. Go figure. And they break them down into zones. So like zone 1 is comprised of scores under 4. Then zone 2 for scores 4 but less than 6. Zone 3, 6 but less than 7. 4, 7 less than 8. And then zone 5 is the highest one, which is 8 and above. This sounds like a lot. I know. For us, it's like this was a lot of shit.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to like learn that it's almost like an ASVAB, so to speak.
Yes.
And then there's subcategory grading to that.
Yes. And if any of you guys are curious as to where your occupation or your industry falls into this score in this zone, if you guys go to onnetonline.org and search your occupation, it'll show up in kind of like a bullet form about what the Department of Labor classifies your occupation, like a air quote formal occupation. There'll be some codes to it. And then as you scroll down through it, it'll give you like a job zone assignment. And it's usually anywhere between 1 through 5, right? And then based on what we said, if it's in zone 3 or higher, then it's considered skilled labor. And then likewise say, like if you're in the military, they have this section there where it's called crosswalks. Like say like you're in a very military specific job, like say like missile launch repair person, right? There's no other occupation like that in the civilian world like ever, because no one fires rockets at people or places for a living. Right?
Well, you weren't around my neighborhood on the 4th of July then. There was clearly that happening.
Oh, fuck. Since we're going on a tangent on this. This is so true.
I was standing in the master bedroom, which faces the street in my home. And I looked out the window, and you're supposed to see fireworks going vertical. And one came horizontal, north to south. I opened the curtains. I saw that happen, and I was like, "Oh!" And I just closed the curtains. It's just like, who the hell's shooting this shit? And it was one of the big ones, like an M80, and the thing, boom, at second story level in the middle of the street. Car alarms going off and shit. Oh my god! So people do shoot rockets at each other for a living on the 4th of July.
I stand corrected. And it's you know what? Yeah. So like with the crosswalks, you that's mostly for military people. But say like you have a military specific job and it's only found or most commonly found in the military. You type up what service you're in and then what your occupation is called in that service, and then it'll translate that into closely related civilian occupations, right? So like instead of missile launch repairman, now you go to something like missile launch quality assurance or missile assembly quality assurance or missile manufacturing, something to that effect.
Missile final assembly production tech, something or other, you know.
Something to that effect, yeah. So that's a hint too for all you guys in the military. If you're curious about what your job translates into the civilian world, or you're looking for a job that kind of sort of fits to what you guys do, there's their hint. onnetonline.org and go to the crosswalks. And that's for anybody, really. So you kind of see like where your skills match up to another occupation that you're kind of sort of thinking of going into. Let's say like aircraft mechanics. And I think here, as we go down this article, this is where we feel the misconception starts.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to cover this next part, if you don't mind, Six.
For sure.
So I'll read this paragraph to everyone here. This is where it gets a little tricky. Although the Department of Labor no longer classifies occupations with a skilled, semi-skilled, or unskilled title, the SVP score could impact you directly, or it can impact you and directly correlates to classifications used by the Social Security Administration, and when making disability determinations. But their classifications, right, in the Social Security office are, guess what? Skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled. So, Christ on a cracker, you know. An SVP score of 1 to 2 falls into the unskilled category. 3 to 4 indicates semi-skilled work. and then 5 to 9 is considered skilled labor.
Yes.
So Department of Labor says, guess what? We're not going to use those no more. We're going to use these job zones. But then for your retirement, for your benefits, for your pay, they go to the old ways. So in typical government fashion, they are all on the same page and here for you.
They're on the same page, but they're playing different songs, Yeah. How does that work? But sure. So
like I heard a song on the radio last night and it was from the 80s. And I think we've hit, not to go on a side tangent too much here, but we've hit a peak with music creation as humanity. So we're now recycling old songs from the 80s, but they're trying to put their mashup on it. And I swear to God, it was the modern version of, you ever see a SpongeBob episode where they had to play in the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
And they're all learning to play instruments and nothing sounds right. And it's like nails on a chalkboard. That's how this song was. And that's kind of what these two departments are here. They're trying to do the same thing, but one's playing the clarinet terribly and the other one's using the violin as a hammer. So just really efficient. And as most of you are aware, the government's uber efficient.
There we go. So that's where we feel it starts, right? We're thinking is Department of Labor, which is halfway true, but then it's also classified with the Social Security Administration in terms of benefits and disability claims and stuff. And then those guys go into skilled and unskilled, or skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled. So where does aircraft maintenance fall into all this, right? What zone are we? What score are we? And what's going on from that? So as far as aircraft maintenance technicians and avionics people are concerned, we fall into zone 3, which is scores 6, but below 7. So based on either one with the Department of Labor and Social Security Administration, we're considered skilled labor, right? So semi-misconception answered, our brains imploded, we're considered skilled labor. Right.
We are considered skilled in the eyes of the SVP.
Yes.
And Department of Labor.
Yes. Now, here's where it gets convoluted, because this sounds too good to be true, right? Like, because if this is true, then why is that misconception still rolling, right? And then here's the absolute source of this idea that we are considered unskilled labor, is because when you look at these zones and you look at the codes and you look at the scores, you look at aircraft maintenance as a whole, it's not just aircraft maintenance technician or avionics technician. We break down into different specialties, right? You have ramp technicians, you have engine technicians, you have engine overhaul technicians, you have people who are just remove and install, you got ground support equipment techs, you got seat and life support techs, all kinds of stuff, right? And as a whole, we have to do kind of sort of a little bit of everything on that, right? Or at least for the most part anyway. Like you as an A&P mechanic, depending on what organization you're with, you're kind of like the solve-it-all person for that organization, especially if you're AOG. We're just not going to, MVP can attest to this the most. Like when they send you on a call as an AOG, they kind of expect you that whatever the problem is, you're going to figure it out and fix it.
Yeah, you're going to work engine issues. You're going to work hydro system issues. You're going to work avionics system issues. You're going to work cabin environmental control issues. You're going to work life support systems. You're going to touch. There's not really anything on that asset you won't touch, or that you're not expected to touch as an A&P, right, in an AOG environment.
Right. And then even with the A&P certification process, you have the engines, you have airframes, and you have general, right? There's a lot of stuff that can fall under general. And there's a reason why they group it as general, because you're going to see enough of it, but not so much that you're going to have to be specifically certified for this. And avionics people see this the most because there's a basic understanding of how to handle avionics equipment. And then there's a deeper dive where you guys are digging into digital logic. You're digging into the codes. You're making wires from scratch, all kinds of craziness, right? There's too much, but not enough to have every single one of you specialize in that specific thing. And then that's where like the Department of Labor comes in with these different groups, right? So for different specialties, they have these different groups, and it kind of goes from broad to narrow, major to minor, and then broad versus detailed. It sounds very convoluted just by saying this, and I'm kind of confused, honestly, about what their logic was when they went with it. But it kind of makes sense. But at the same time, if you were to look at these groups, for example, they have major group, which is code 49-40, installation, maintenance, and repair, equipment mechanics. And then there's a minor group, 49-3000, almost the exact same verbiage, vehicle and mobile equipment mechanics, installers, and repairs. So the major group being aircraft mechanics, the minor group being like just basic mechanics, like say entry level automotive.
Like your aid shop, your ground support equipment stuff.
Yeah, or like entry level automotive stuff. And then you have a broad occupation group, 49-3010, aircraft mechanics and service technicians, pretty much like the ramp agents or the ramp techs that just they just top off your oil levels and service your tires and then bobs your uncle, they're out of there. And then they have a detailed occupation group, 49-3011, aircraft mechanics and service technicians. That's it. There's no other explanation other than aircraft mechanics and
service
technicians.
Which is weird because the 3010 is aircraft mechanics and service technicians. And the detailed one is also aircraft mechanics and service technicians.
Right. So you see how it's getting confusing even for us, because like they're different codes, but they say the same damn thing, right?
Yeah. So what's that? We'll have to look those up and determine what the fine verbiage is in that.
Right.
You know,
right.
That separates those categories.
Right. And then likewise with avionics technicians, they have the minor group, which is 49-2000, electrical and electronic equipment mechanics, installers and repairs. The broad group, 49-2090, which is miscellaneous electrical and electronic equipment mechanics and installers repairs. And then detailed occupation group, 49-2091, avionics technician. Okay.
So it's kind of crazy, right? So the minor group is electrical and electronic equipment mechanics, installers, and repairs. Broad is miscellaneous electrical and electronic equipment mechanics, installers, and repairers. And detailed is avionics technicians. So as you go up in your skill set, the less verbiage you get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that mean because you're detailed, like you're the jack of all trades, you're the master of every system, so we don't have to, delineate the specifics because you do it all? I don't know. Pretty wild, though, huh?
I mean, that's kind of like how it sounds like to me, right? And then here's the funny part. As aircraft mechanics and avionics technicians, now all those different specialties, since you do it all and you understand a good majority of it, you technically fall under all those groups. You're major and minor at the same time. Now, that sounds cool, right? Like, hell yeah, I'm freaking like, what's that where it says I'm omnipresent, I'm everywhere and anywhere at the same time. Or what's it? I'm anywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Yeah, I am everything and all things. No, I am everything and nothing.
Yes. Right. That sounds like some Buddha.
What was that movie? The Kingdom or something like that. It was basically back in the Crusades. And the one dude, he was in France and he goes on the crusade over to the Middle East or whatever, and he's fighting. Can't remember it's based on a historical. Had a couple of true historical figures in it, but they're fighting over Jerusalem and why it's so important to both, Christianity and Islam. But at the end, the Islamists that, they win. And he asked the head of them, he goes, "Why is this land so important to you?" "Because it means everything and nothing." And he rides away on a horse. And you're like, what?
Right. That's kind of a terrible excuse, but yeah, that's exactly what it's like for us here. Like, we are everything and nothing at the same time. Now, why is this a problem? And why should we care about it? And why should we do anything to fix it? So, if anyone here has ever ran stats on anything, or has anyone ever had to be part of like a data analysis group, you having one factor that exists in 2 or 3 different fields becomes extremely confusing, and it gives you very bad data, right? So if you have one point that exists in 3 fields at the exact same time, unless you stipulate to expand those fields so you can get a better picture of things, it's going to give you false answers. And a lot of this exists, especially when they were doing like assessments back in 2014 for like the forecast of aircraft maintenance power or manpower or workforce requirements. So back in 2014, they would do like an assessment that says up to 2024 or up to 2031 or whatever the case may be. We do like a 10-year snapshot. We expect to have these requirements. And if you're grouped in all of those at the same and none of those at the same time, you're going to get some false numbers. Like example with this one government assessment that they did, they've projected in 2014 that they were going to need 1,600 aircraft maintenance technicians between 2014 to 2024. No, that's a bold-faced lie. Like 1,600 is probably like just 3 airlines.
Just one repair station.
Yeah, that's like 1 or 3 airlines in California alone. That's it. So
yeah, that's LAX, that's John Wayne in San Diego, and that's Palm Springs. Like, what about Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so that's like less than 1% of the entire AMT workforce. So we're figuring in 10 years, we're only going to see 1,600 openings? No. And again, this is before COVID-19. So the numbers were trending bad before COVID hit. And now COVID's here, we got like 90%. We're in a 90% need at this point.
Right.
But this is what we're talking about. When the numbers are skewed and you get bad analysis results, it comes into stuff like this. So like, oh, we only need 1,600 mechanics or technicians in the next 10 years, which we know is a bold-faced error, because as we just said, like 1,600, that's just 3 airports. There's way more than 3 airports in the entire US alone. And then each of those airlines or each of those MROs are going to need way more than 1,600 in just 10 years, especially because the talent pool for knowledgeable technicians is slowly dwindling, because a lot of them, they're retiring. A lot of them are just they're not being as mobile and flexible as they used to. And then pre-pandemic, they were already starting the growth was already outpacing the workforce. So they're getting burned out. They're tired. I don't want to do this no more. They're having a change of heart. So we're already seeing gaps in those, but yet they've already determined that we're only going to need 1,600, which is asinine.
Yeah, but then Boeing did an independent study and they found the need for 127,000 over the next 20 years. It's a more realistic number. And that was just for the US alone. That's not including our friends in Canada, Australia, Europe, Philippines, everywhere.
Yeah. And that's just Boeing too. There's all kinds of other places that deal with that too. So you got Boeing, then there's CFM, who makes the LEAP engines for Airbus and Boeing. And that's another thing too. So when you have these subcontracted MROs or stations where they make parts or they repair parts or they do assessments on parts, those are all mechanics too, or technicians too. And that what that can fall into either the detail group, since they're deep diving into these parts, or they're deep diving into the aircraft, or they can just be broad, like kind of like your general aviation service stations, where like the service tech is the pilot, you know?
Right.
So that's where it starts to become a problem. That's kind of like where we tie back to at the very beginning, where we said being a jack of all trades kind of sort of hurts you in the long run. Now, we're not saying just dial it back and be a master in one thing, because now you're playing into the group. It's like, well, we don't need this detailed group no more, so we're just going to go ahead and axe that, because we used to rely on XYZ. Now we're into this new technology, and that kind of phases these guys out. So now you're out of a job. So what we can see about this, and this is what kind of the article is suggesting, is we need to push more awareness to this. We need to push more separated categories for these, like not just having everyone fall into the same group, exist in one place and exist in the other. And then that's what throws up our numbers.
Right. And then we also need to get the Department of Labor and the Social Security office all on the same page too.
Yes.
And then how do you do that other than, is that reaching out to your senator and having them punch something up? I don't know. If somebody is very savvy on that side of things, please let us know. We'd love to. We either create the petition or sign the petition or something. I don't know how that works, but
yeah. And then likewise, there's all these different organizations. Like this article came up with this Aircraft Maintenance Fraternal Association. There's other ones listed on this article as well, where like we can support these kind of groups that actually try to help standardize a lot of this stuff. I think that's the big one. A key move there too, is they're trying to standardize the requirements for this stuff, and then what separates them from being skilled and unskilled. Because that's another thing too that this article mentions, is there's no separation between a certified licensed technician from an unlicensed one or uncertified one. They're just kind of grouped together in the mix, like aircraft maintenance technician, yes. So
yeah, but I know tons of people in the industry that don't have an A&P license, but have been working in aviation for longer than me.
Yep.
Right. So that's going to get tough. So how do you determine who's right? If you got people with 20 years of military where it's not required, mm-hmm. and they go and work for a military contractor who also doesn't require it for many of their programs, how do you determine at that point what's, the licensing and to the skilled versus unskilled or whatever else, Right.
Now, and there we'll probably hear some comments right along the lines like, well, just get him a license, just give him a cert, right? True, it can be. But again, this kind of goes into that whole convoluted step of like detailed versus minor versus broad versus narrow.
Right.
All you're doing is you're just saturating the field with licenses or certifications. And then as we all know, when you saturate something of one thing, it just becomes irrelevant. And then they just kind of start.
Right.
They say like, it's kind of like how like with college degrees right now, like,
yep.
They say like, oh, everyone get a degree. Cool. And then now your whole workforce is saturated with bachelors. So what's the next separation? Oh, get a master's degree. And so
and I'm seeing that right now where it's basically, hey, you've been doing the position for a lot longer than these other over here. But one has a PhD in applied mathematics and the other one, has 2 bachelors. So yeah, they don't have as much of experience as you, and you only have 1 degree. So, but they're an easier sell to HR because they have more. That's how it's literally going. So like we were saying earlier, and as Six has said now, with if you saturate the whole industry with licenses, then everything is nothing,
Yep. So I like where they're going with this, is like we need to push for a more standardized way of having to make things more distinct, which I think is a lot easier, because it's easier to verify someone to a standard than to just accept a certificate saying that this is what we deem as the standard, because now you're just going to have people who are very good at getting certified in things and don't know dick shit about the actual performance requirements. And we can always say like, oh, that's based on the certifying body where they're smart enough or they're good enough to actually do the job, which is true. But now we're rolling into the marketing of things, of how one certifying body can market one better than the other, and they're no much different other than how much money they pay to get to put their face on a brand. You know, that's a whole nother thing. that's something that we ourselves are not too savvy out. But what, again, like what we're saying with this one and what this article is saying is like, we should push for something more standardized, at least something along the lines like, this is how we verify your skill set, and this is how we're basing it off of, versus just broad versus narrow versus detailed versus whatever. And then what this article says, and us ourselves, we're kind of learning this too, is the urging of technicians to become more concerned about the craft, about being concerned about the industry, about how we're being categorized, how we're being designated. Because how this stuff plays in affects our benefits, affects our wages, affects how we're classified.
Pay,
yeah, and disability claims and stuff like that. MVP and I can attest to the highest degree of how like a simple designation can mean a big pay gap in benefits as well. Like,
oh yeah,
one job we were at, we were doing the work of basically a DOM. We were two DOMs existing in an airfield, but just because they coded us a certain way, we were classified as, or we were being paid and rated as clerks.
Like, yeah, we were. Well, I think you found that one night digging through some documents.
Yeah. So we're basically DOMs, directors of maintenance, associate directors of programs, or whatever you guys want to slice
Pro
this.
supers, maintenance control, quality in some aspects, you know?
Yeah, we're like basically running an shy of being the airport facilities side of things. Like, I'm making sure the logistics of getting the toilet cleaned. I'm the logistics of getting the water and power fed through the whole facility. Shy of that, basically ran everything else. We did everything from weather to the documentation to get signed. But again, going back to how we were classified under occupation, we were basically clerks. Like, I'm just shy of being what do you call it? Not even like, I'm like the service desk at an AutoZone, you know?
Oh man, basically, we were. If you look at the pay band, let's say for an admin assistant, we were towards the middle to slightly above middle of a pay band for an admin assistant.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. An admin assistant. I was like, I was going to service take. No, that's not it. I was having a brain fart for a second just because it was so annoying how that was, man. Like, and it didn't help that the responsibility designation didn't really help either, because there were times where it's like, oh, you guys are just this. Like, well, this designation or this office. Yeah. Is kind of what makes the difference between your flight happening and you guys getting your asses handed to you. So
yeah, they'd say, well, you're just this. Well, if I do just this, then good luck with everything else. And I think we played that game for about a week. and basically, and we had a good boss, right? You say, well, why would you even stay in that role? Well, we stayed for as long as we did because we had a good boss. I enjoyed working for him. He was a good guy, and he knew the reality of the situation. He wouldn't bullshit you. But we were like, okay, we'll play that, and with other department leadership, like, okay, well, we're just this then. And then finally, our boss came to us anyway. He's like, all right, yield. I yield. He's like, please continue doing what you're doing. He goes, I understand why you were doing it. He goes, I'm not mad at you. He's like, but oh my God, he's like the meetings and the stuff that I got to sit in and listen to the next day. Everybody's crying that nothing's happening. Like, oh, weird how nothing's happening if we just do what they say we are.
Right.
you know what I mean?
You might want to codify that into writing or something, just so everyone's on the same shitty music, that if it comes out of this office, it means this, right? Not because you guys think it's so, it's because it's been determined so. Not trying to flex our dicks as hard as we could, but that's an example, a very extreme example of like just having a code shy can mean can have such a big impact.
Well, let's look at it from the AOG realm, right? Sorry to cut you off, but let's look at it from the AOG realm. You as an AOG tech are expected to work everything as I outlined earlier. But we also had some guys on the floor who were same pay as me, but they were missing like three different systems experience. Like one guy, he couldn't go on jobs that required engine work because he didn't have any engine experience. Okay, well, what's his experience? Oh, he's a sheet metal guy. Okay, well, those calls are fewer and further between. So what do we do with this guy, right? Well, we're just going to have him clean it up around the shop and stuff today. So he's going to get paid the same amount that I am, but I'm out there. It's just like that's why we need these things to be broken down further, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because just calling him AOG wasn't fair to the ones who had the experience and the know-how and the skill set. Or you would have to be called in on an off day and say, hey, this guy's got a job up here in Santa Barbara, and it's got potential oil leak, or it's not making power in the right engine. Okay, mm-hmm. Well, he's got the manuals. He can call the FSR. No, we don't really we need somebody to go play oversight. Well, okay, but why is he making the same hourly that I am? Right now I'm getting all overtime for going on that day. So whatever, I can see both sides, right? Mm-hmm. I can see both sides, but it's also not fair that I have to go in on one of my off days because that person doesn't have the same skill set that I had, but we're labeled the same.
Yep.
Within these brackets that we've talked about today.
Right. And then this kind of factors into, like, say your workforce requirements too, right? Like, I need to have X amount of technicians. I have to have X amount of inspectors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the title designations really come into effect. Because, like, well, he's technically one, so that fulfills my workforce requirements. You don't get in trouble. You continue on with your day. And then say the person who got the title or got the designation, now they're laughing their way to the bank because now they have that as a resume builder. And so they go to move somewhere else where they're less qualified, but they have that on their back saying, oh, I've done this. So that means that this equates to this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You start turning into title chasers, right? Where like your amount of work is not that great or is not that impactful.
Impressive, but yeah. You look good on paper. Yes,
that's it. That's exactly it. So
another reason, I've learned this recently, right? Going through contract auditing and stuff.
Yes.
There's things called LCRs. What's that stand for? Something least contract requirements. Basically, with certain jobs within a contract, you're required to have for certain parts. So let's say security, right?
Yep.
When you hire somebody for security, they have to hit the X amount of wickets for security accreditations, knowledge base, schooling, time in service, right? For
Yep.
certain positions within the security realm. So the security manager has to hit, let's say there's 5 wickets. The security manager definitely has to hit all 5. The deputy has to hit 4. Your analysts have to hit 3, and everybody else, 2 or less.
Mm-hmm.
And those are contractual requirements, and you can get in massive trouble if you are employing people in those positions that have LCRs attached to them, because that has been deemed what's necessary to ensure that department runs the way it's supposed to for that program and contract.
Yep.
So, getting back to the AMT thing here, within different companies, I mean, I would almost think you would have, you could call them LCNs or whatever you want to call them when we break down these designations. But if you're the DOM, you should probably hit 5. If you're the deputy, 4. If you're a senior, 3 or 4. senior lead mech, 3 or 4, and then, designated down from there. But I think it's almost necessary, because if 6 goes and he's got his A&P and he's got 15 years military on this platform, and he's got, DOM experience, and he's got, he's been to Hydra school and engine school for this platform, and he and I go into the job together, and he and I are getting paid the same, but yet he's got to train me on everything every day because I have 0 experience and time and service on that platform and 0 schooling. Maybe I have the A&P and that's it. But I don't have the years in. I don't have the Hydra school. I don't have the engine school, the Gen Fam for that. I don't have the airframe Gen Fam. I don't have whatever avionics system that platform employs. Maybe he's been to the school for that. But yet he and I are going to get hired in at the same level and the same grade. That's almost unfair and insulting for the time that he's put in and to the time he's taken to better himself and obtain those specifics for that platform.
Right. And that's a whole other thing that you have to consider, especially, let's say, like the person who got hired or you got hired for that same level. Maybe you have equivalent experience on something else. Like you just need to get hired on or trained on the specifics. That goes into little things. But I get where MVP is saying, like, if you don't have at least the basic wickets for a specific job code, right? Like what we're trying to illustrate here, then why are we going to bring you in for that? Right. And then that's kind of like the problem here when we're grouping everyone into the same group at the same time, at the same existence, is because we can't disseminate what that is. And there should be a way to look that up without having to ask the person directly during an interview. Like I already have,
or read it on their resume or something, like a database of some type.
Right. Like it's kind of like when you do an audit, you research and you ask the question to clarify. Like you don't ask the question to gain knowledge or to know it first time. You kind of have an idea of what's going on already, and you're doing that just to verify. Because at that point, you're just trying to see if they're in the wickets, if they're on the curve, or if they're completely out and they just lied on their resume, or they just just lied on their job. And you can kind of tell right off the bat once you start questioning him. But when you, like, say someone's resume says A&P, AOG, DOM, this and that. So it's like, oh, this dude should know a whole lot of shit, right? So you start thinking of harder questions in your head, right? And you start asking this person and they just blank, like, yeah, we're done here.
Yeah, or what if they say, oh, I was the DOM? Well, were you really? Or did your boss call out that day and you were his DOA for one day?
Yes.
And so now you're putting DOM as what you did.
Yes. I've seen that.
Yeah, maybe you're experienced enough that you can fill in for a day, but to run the show day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, it's a different can of worms because there's other things the DOM's doing that you didn't do on your one day as the delegate of authority.
Right. Yes. Like you pulled the weekend duty, for one time, and then like you're just the bridge. And then it's always with that caveat: if something happens, call me. Right. It's because like you've overstepped your allocated duties or your designation, and so it needs to elevate up. They're not going to ask you to solve the question right then and there unless you specifically know the answer. But yeah, I've seen that happen so many times, and guys bit off way more than they can chew, and it's just like, how the fuck did you get here?
Yeah.
So in other words, right, for all this, right, there's a lot of these groups and unions are pushing to standardize stuff. And they're also, I think as of 2017, they're looking about revamping the A&P certification process. Where they are with that, we don't know, and what sort of stuff they're going to include or exclude. So anyone who's going to a school right now, please tell us, like, what sort of stuff are they pushing onto you as basic requirements than it was when we went through back in like the early 2000s. Because
I bet it's more avionics heavy than when I went through.
I want to say you're right. Because I remember one listener was showing us examples of digital logic, and to be honest, I didn't know what the fuck he was showing. You know,
like, all right,
because I'm like, because it looked like models of a DNA strand. You know what I mean? Like this molecule does this, and this molecule does that. I'm like, what the fuck?
The dinosaurs have 24 DNA molecules. That's exactly what I heard in my head right now.
Yeah, so like, what
from the first Jurassic Park?
It's like, what the fuck is this, right? And I was like, oh, it's digital logic. Like, you already lost me. And especially people who are doing digital logic right now, there's like so much math and there's so much gates. Let's call them gates that have to occur just to make a light turn on or just to make a warning sound, right? All this chain of events that have to happen. It sounds so automatic, but when you break it down, right, it turns into like this whole matrix of shit that you got to pass through in order to make it work. I'm like, kudos to you guys, man, because my brain explodes anything outside of third grade math. So, but yeah, and so with this article, with this group, the Aircraft Maintenance Fraternal Association, there's other ones too that were cited by these individuals. 1 second, who are they? There is like, I can't figure it out. We'll have it on the show notes, but there's all kinds of groups out there, like the AMC Aero. That's another group, are the ones who hold like that AMC competition. That their whole mission of that is to bring awareness of just how skillful these individuals have to be to keep planes flying safe. Groups like that is kind of what's helping us in the long run to ensure that we're having the right standards codified correctly and having the government entities that oversee this, that take statistics and make decisions off of these, are getting the right info. So they're not just blanket shotgunning us into things and just saying stuff like, oh, we only need 1,600 mechanics in the next 10 years. Like,
right, yeah.
We know it's...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was like, which we know is like 100% false. We mean like 160,000 like in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, the unfortunate side is and with many other people in other industries, the decisions on your trade are being determined by those who have never ever worked in your trade.
Yep.
They only have experienced the results of your trade, which is flying to their vacation.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, they're calling the shots on your life.
Yep. So like, I think another big takeaway from all of this, from this article and from us, is like, we want to be at that table, or at least someone with a connected, resonated voice from us to them of like, this is our needs, this is what needs to happen, and this is how we can all help each other along. So we're all getting an equal and fair share of the pie here.
Yeah, and it should happen because I mean, obviously, since aviation began, it's not going away, and it's only going to grow as our technology develops, and we start being able to shoot to more off-world locations in the space side specifically. And the world keeps getting smaller as we develop faster and faster and more efficient aircraft, and it's just going to become the new way to travel, more than what it already is, I guess. I need to go from my home to San Diego. Well, I'm just going to jump in my Uber quadcopter and take it there, like that.
Can you imagine?
Well, something like that's already being developed and tested.
Really?
Oh yeah, I got a buddy who works on that program.
Sweet. Can you imagine that Uber helicopter?
Yeah, but I mean, think about like in places like Los Angeles alone. I mean, that now maybe it gets a little tight in the air, depending on if you had as many of those quadcopters in the air as you had cars on the road. But I mean, think about what that would do for congestion or your commute time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Or you get a quadcopter ride share where there's 6 of you packed into one, and you're all going downtown LA for work. But God, if you can save yourself 2.5, 3 hours of commute time,
most definitely. You're absolutely right on that. That's actually pretty good. So whoever's doing Uber helicopter, man, hit us up. I'm so down for that. I'm all up for that program, especially to miss out on California traffic. Yeah. Any final thoughts on any of this, MVP?
No, it's good to know that there is groups out there looking out for our best interest, because I got to tell you, even it said in the article misleading information, and I was privy to that misleading information where we were unskilled and nobody gave a damn.
Yep. Same here.
So it's nice to know that there's groups looking out for our interest and trying to change the narrative and everything that goes with it.
Very much so. And like you said, man, I fell into that hole too, and a lot of us are. And it's kind of sad to hear that we're wrong, but we're also kind of right. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, you're wrong, but you're right. Like, what?
Yep. I guess my final thoughts are, we are everything and nothing.
Got him.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. but again, yeah, this like what MVP is saying, there's groups out there that's doing this. You guys can help out too by, if you search the Aircraft Maintenance Fraternal Association. There's other groups out there as well, and it's listed on their site. I just can't figure out where at the moment. That actually help out. There's the AMC Aero team that holds the AMC competition that also pushes for this stuff. They're all over about getting technicians the dues that they're worth, and then bringing awareness to that as well. There's also petitioning your congressman, however efficient that's going to be. But there's means for us to do so. And in the end, this is all going to help us to make sure that our wages are correct, that our experience levels are annotated correctly, and then all the stats that determine our livelihoods for the next 20, 30, 50 years is accurate. So this stuff really does matter if you really think about it. Or you can just step out of aviation and go somewhere like an electrician, where like you guys have your own dialed in certifications. But I mean, he said, she said at this point. If you have any questions for us, and you have some comments or like to share an experience about how this stuff breaks down, just send us a line either via email, visit our website at cancelformaintenance.com, or just shoot us a line on one of our socials like Instagram, Facebook, and stuff like that. We're very keen on answering them as quickly as we can. And if you have any other show ideas, like some other topics you'd like us to break down or explore, this was actually kind of fun for us because this helped dispel a lot of misconceptions that we ourselves had. And we ourselves have talked.
Big learning experience for me.
Right. And again, it doesn't kind of help when it says you're wrong, but you're also right. Yeah. Again, shoot us those, either a website or a socials. And on that note, thanks again, everybody. And we will see you again next time.
Bye, everyone.
We'd like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to continue to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners, with special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Ryan Freshour, Dan Schubert, Jenny Dignan, and the ladies of the Dick Talk and Mimosas podcast. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. Visit our shop at cancelformaintenance.com and grab some swag to show off both your support for us and your prowess as an aircraft technician. If you have ideas for the show, or you'd like to be a guest on the show, visit our contact us section and send us a line. We will do what we can to get your ideas or yourself on the show. You can also follow us on social media, such as on Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at Canx, that's CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or on Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Check out some of our affiliates like Rockwell Time, where they make both rugged and classy watches to fit your lifestyle. Use the code CX4MX and save 10% off your purchase. Support us on Patreon. Our patrons get exclusive perks such as access to our Discord, discounts and early access to merch, special patron-only episodes, and so much more. Thank you again so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.